Chapter 16, Shock and Determination. Midoriya was not having a great week. One of his only friends graduated early from school and Bakugo was still mad at him for trying to save him from that sludge villain. The only good thing to happen lately was All Might accepting him as a successor and training him, which resulted in him being too tired to deal with anything else. Meeting Alan yesterday during his training was a pleasant surprise. It showed Izuku that Alan, even with all of his secrecy, still considered Izuku a friend. Today he was back home early. All Might said he had something to do in the evening. As he was seated on his couch taking a break, he decided to turn on his TV and watch some news. Maybe some heroes he liked would make an appearance. As he looked at the news, the anchor suddenly stopped talking and looked somewhat startled. She started speaking quickly. "We have received last-minute information on the identity of the famous vigilante Yellow Flash." On the screen of his TV appeared a photo of Alan's ID. Seeing Alan's photo didn't surprise him as much as he thought it would. He had already subconsciously realized that his friend was a vigilante. What he felt now wasn't betrayal or fear, he was worried about his friend's safety. A 15-year-old who recently graduated from a local middle school. Even the anchor looked quite surprised by the information she was reading out loud. "We will be transferring to a live broadcast of a police and hero team trying to catch the aforementioned young vigilante." Suddenly, Izuku perked up, seemingly shocked at what he was hearing. Since his appearance, no hero even got close to the vigilante. Now they were attempting to capture him. Thinking back, he remembered what All Might told him. He looked extremely serious while doing so. This made Izuku realize that the symbol of peace was going to participate in this. He couldn't help but feel even more worried as the news anchor transferred the view to a helicopter. It seems that the symbol of peace has also taken action. He could hear a reporter comment on the situation. His voice was promptly ignored, most people paying too much attention to what was happening to actually hear him. Now at home everyone could see the vigilante. He was not even wearing his costume, but they could tell. He was the one surrounded by a group of pro-heroes. Midoriya could recognize most of them: Midnight, Best Jeanist, Snipe. The only one he couldn't recognize the one with a scarf, but All Might was there. He could see them talking, the news helicopter not being able to catch the sound of their conversation due to its engine. They were probably trying to dissuade Alan, hoping to end today without any conflict. It seemed to not work so well. The fight started abruptly. Alan was moving too quickly for the viewers at home to keep up with. In a very short span of time, he had taken down all of the heroes besides All Might. Midoriya was surprised. He had seen the Alan fight before, against Kikin mainly. But this was on another level. He already knew how strong pro-heroes were. He had written hundreds of pages about their strengths. To see four go down so quickly was shocking. The next few minutes of the fight were even more shocking. Alan was fighting toe-to-toe against All Might, a figure invincible in the eyes of most of the public. Most of the people knew of Alan's reputation, they expected him to be strong. But to match the symbol of peace was something else. Their fight shocked many. One such person was Bakugo. As he stared wide-eyed at the television, his old hag had called him downstairs, saying a friend of his was on the news. Seeing his rival fighting All Might was not what he was expecting. Alan was never exactly friend with him, but there was always a sense of mutual respect somewhere in their interactions, even if they butted heads whenever they met. He had considered Alan an equal, and his presence had subconsciously humbled him. He was still arrogant to most, but he was no longer meaning it when calling others extras. His mother knew about Alan because they had met before at a school gathering. Since there was no legal guardian there for Alan, he needed to be present personally in case something important was announced. Overall, Bakugo considered to this day that he and Alan would compete even in UA. His view of that disappeared. Seeing Alan fight against All Might, Bakugo now knew that Alan was holding back while fighting him. Looking at the title of the broadcast, he saw famous vigilante Yellow Flash is confronted by the symbol of peace. Alan was a vigilante. Bakugo felt like exploding, smoke coming out of his palms. His mother was looking quite shaken. To her, Alan was just a really tall and polite boy. Now he was looking at him, battling pro-heroes. It wasn't a nice sight. Especially when he was blown away during the fight. Even Bakugo himself couldn't help but squint at some of the blows Alan was blocking. The fight had completely destroyed most of the surroundings, it was clear to him now. Alan was clearly on another level compared to him. But Bakugo isn't a pushover, no, he wouldn't let the gap between him and Alan widen any further. He was going to start training a lot after that day. Midoriya also had a similar idea. He was supposed to become the successor of All Might, he needed to catch up with his friend. Both of them had different reasons, but they now had a similar purpose, a target. Something personal to drive them to become stronger. Besides the desire to become number one. Needless to say, most of the public was shocked by this display of power, they didn't think any less of the symbol of peace. Most considered Yellow Flash a hero anyway. The fact that he was so young meant that he had time to become a licensed hero. Seeing Yellow Flash defeated did little to the public when it came to dissuading his rising fame. Even as he was put to sleep and apprehended by the police. Most news sites didn't really dare to call this for what it was. The fall of the vigilante Yellow Flash, and with him gone the streets of Musudafo were going to become restless again. The heroes now needed to fill in the gap they had created. Chapter 17, Interrogation. When I woke up I was in a grey room, locked to a table, both my hands and feet were cuffed in heavy restraints. I could only describe them as a completely useless effort, they had no C-stone in this world, therefore they had no actual way of detaining a Logia user. The room was really bland, really who uses grey for their walls? Trying to escape out of my bindings was unnecessary. They were most likely monitoring this cell. As expected, a few minutes after I woke up the door to my poorly decorated cell was opened. In walked the heroes that captured me along with the chief of police and the detective that found my identity. All Might wasn't there, at least not in hero form. He was Skinny Might now. Without even letting them speak I started. Hey, guys. Big coincidence that we'd meet here. Some looked startled, some amused. Naomasa still looked especially concerned. I guess I'll have to lighten the mood a bit. We will be taking you to an interrogation room. The chief of police recovered quickly to my unusual greeting. Yeah, I kind of figured that out. Quick thing, you guys really need to fire your interior decorator. This room isn't really up to standard. My lazy and slow jokes seemed to somewhat annoy the chief of police. Aizawa was also not really amused. The only decent reaction I got was from Midnight and Snipe, a small chuckle. They quickly stopped as Eraser stared daggers at them. Toshinori just sweat dropped. The chief coughed a bit and continued. Okay, we will unstrap you from the table. They unstrapped me, and under my big restraints were smaller restraints. Geez, they really went all out on the security. I got up from the table, my action seemed sudden to them. I could feel some people tense up, Midnight preparing to rip a bit of her suit open. Calm down. I won't try to escape. By the way, I hope you guys weren't hurt last night. I got really into fighting All Might. Hope it didn't affect you too much. I was taking on a cordial tone. Truthfully, I didn't pay much attention to them besides Aizawa and Midnight. Well, I was crushed under a tree during your fight. But it wasn't really your fault. Snipe was being friendly here. It was totally my fault. All Might did most of the collateral damage anyways. Aizawa said grumpily. He probably was a bit salty that I targeted his weakness. Toshinori also looked a bit guilty at Aizawa's jab. I was taken to a small room with a table in the corner. I was seated in facing the door while the detective was right in front of me. In the room a woman was waiting. I could remember her being Naomasa's sister, Makoto. She had a lie detector quirk if I think. I wasn't really planning on lying anyways. Naomasa still looked somewhat tense, even with all of my attempts to lighten the mood. The others left the room, leaving me, Naomasa and his sister alone. They were likely watching the interrogation on a screen. Makoto put her hand on my shoulder before we started the interrogation. Staring into my brown, somewhat shady-looking eyes, Naomasa started asking the usual arbitrary questions about my name, age, the validity of my identity. Which I responded truthfully. Whenever an answer was given, Makoto would just nod if it was genuine. I tested her reaction to lies by claiming I was the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe. She just gave me a look and didn't even bother disproving it. After a few jokes and a few answered questions, Naomasa started asking more about my past. What was the reason that made you become a vigilante? His tone was the same as the other questions, but this one obviously held more importance. It's actually quite simple. One night, when I was 10, I was attacked by a villain. He looked surprised by the lazy tone I had taken. There isn't really much to say, the attack made me hate villains in general. The same day I also awakened a quirk, which is nice. My tone was even as if I was completely disconnected from the story I was telling. I had started training my body and my quirk as soon as I had found out about it. It was clear from the look in his eyes, the detective didn't like what he was hearing. Having a child attacked by a villain was bad enough, having said child become a vigilante and fighting more and more villains with minimal training was not a pleasant concept to him or anyone listening. Makoto also looked somewhat shocked by the way I was recounting these events. She still nodded to her brother after regaining her composure. There were quite a few things on the detective's mind. I waited a bit for the next question. To what extent were you injured during the attack? They probably noticed that I didn't have anything about an attack in my medical record. Mainly because when I woke up the wound was already a scar. I was stabbed somewhere around the abdominal region. The villain was probably thinking I would bleed out. He, once again, looked like he was sweating a bit. The fact that I didn't go to the hospital sounded a bit more tragic than necessary. The next question was still related to the injury. How did you recover from said injury? There is nothing to suggest you went to the hospital with it. He was referring to the fact that I reported my quirk soon after it was awakened. Well, when I woke up I was already healed, might be due to my quirk, it has a minor healing factor. I said, in a matter-of-fact tone. My quirk enhanced my physique to the point where some wounds would heal very quickly. But that was after training, technically I didn't lie at all in my sentence. What happened to the villain that attacked you? This question was a bit obvious. He naturally wanted to know what happened to the psycho that attacked a young child. Oh, I caught him a year later. In fact, it was my first appearance on camera. There were quite a few more questions about the situation. This was a bit surprising to hear for the detective. He was probably thinking that I had done something worse to the villain that attacked me. He could tell I wasn't lying. During this whole exchange I was cooperative and talkative. I knew I needed to wait a bit. During your time as a vigilante, you didn't severely harm anybody. Naomasa was probably hoping I would give a reason for that. And express my view on lethal action against villains. I believe that the law is the one that should punish villains. I was just helping them get judged faster. In a sense, this was also true. I never considered myself as the judge, jury, and executioner. I only caught villains. I never cared what happened to them afterwards. The interrogation went on. He kept asking for details about my circumstances, the orphanage, childhood. I answered all of them with honesty. I had no reason to lie anyway. Before the interrogation ended, Naomasa added, "With your situation, we cannot really give you much time in any detention center." He paused to think for a second. "For now, we will do some psychological evaluations to check if there are any hidden issues from your experiences." After that, I was taken to a different cell. This one had a bed, a desk, and a potted plant. It even had a toilet and a mirror. The chief of police most likely didn't want to hear me complain about the decor again. Now I had to wait, again. They needed to check if I was safe to be put on trial. There would still be a trial after all. Vigilantism was still a crime. But they needed to take my age and my mental state into account. Chapter 18, Deal and Villains. It has been about 3 weeks since my interrogation. My psychological tests have come out clean. I was just as sane as everyone else. The only thing to come out was that my maturity was a bit more than that of a regular 15-year-old. My trial will be later this week, it will be a public trial, even cameras will be allowed. Now sitting in my cell, I could feel 3 people approaching it. When the door opened, I was greeted by a rat bear dog who knows. He was Nizu. Behind him were Toshinori and Aizawa. I greeted them with a great smile on my face. Ooh, good day. I'm happy that you decided to visit me at my humble residence. I could see the veins on Aizawa's forehead. Apparently, my sarcasm was not that well hidden. Nizu, however, found my greeting to be somewhat amusing. He did his usual shtick. Am I a mouse, a dog, a bear? My real identity is. He made a comedic pause. I looked like the anticipation was going to kill me. My eyes were wide and my mind was ready for the truth. The principal of UA. I suddenly looked dead inside. Don't even know what I was expecting. At this rate, he'll remain a dilemma forever. Aizawa also looked dead inside, but I think that's just his default skin. Toshinori looked skinny as usual. Nizu quickly continued. Truth is, we are actually here to talk about your future. That's what I was expecting to hear. Wouldn't that be the subject of tomorrow's trial? I asked with curiosity. I already knew what he was insinuating. In such a high-profile case, the verdict is given before the trial even starts. Meaning he already knows what it was and could interfere with it. Tomorrow's trial will not need to happen if you agree to my proposition. I am here to extend an offer to you. I want you to work at UA. You'll also get a provisional hero license. Was he always this excited when speaking? I was expecting a provisional license, but I was thinking that he would extend an offer to join the school in the next year or something. I guess Nizu isn't that easy to predict. Seeing as my reaction wasn't too bad, he continued. On paper it would be something like a house arrest. You would be in an environment filled with pro-heroes. In our system, you would also gain a chance to get a hero license. Sounds good, but how do you plan on convincing the court? I was curious about his strategy here. There were a few approaches he could take. That's not something you should worry about. I don't even need to do anything. No judge would give you a harsh sentence. The public outrage would be too much to handle. He was making a good point. Even with a light sentence, a lot of people would be displeased. My fame was still useful in the end. His approach was to propose an unusual punishment, one in which I had a chance to become a licensed hero and clean my record. The work I'd do at UA would most likely be classified as a form of community labor. So, do you accept? You don't really have much time to choose, we are on a tight schedule. Even asking that was a formality, not much choice here. It's between that and getting a light sentence from a random judge. Sure, sounds fun. Nizu totally expected my answer. He didn't even bother pretending to be surprised. Okay, just so you know, you will also be enrolled in our General Studies department next year. We still want you to get an education. Nizu said this in an excited tone. After that, they left, probably to talk to his connections. This was what I was expecting in the first place. Joining as a student was to be expected. They probably enrolled me in General Studies because I already had experience as a vigilante. I already knew how to be a hero. I only needed to take an exam and get an actual hero license at the appropriate age. Now I only needed to wait. With this deal done, I didn't need to worry about fixing my hair for the trial. Looking into the mirror, I could see that my usually short black hair was growing longer. I needed to get a haircut as soon as possible. My droopy brown eyes were also looking tired. At least I didn't lose the ever-present goofy lazy smile on my lips. I needed some rest. My days were only going to get busier. After getting some leniency, I needed to check on Jiren. I had told him to check the market and tell me if a strange drug appeared in the next few months. I also needed to check on my district. It had been a no-crime zone for a few years. I would hope that even with my absence it wouldn't go to shit. POV narrator. But his hope was fruitless. As soon as the news of his capture reached the public, criminal activity already spiked. There was no other reason for it. Without the yellow flash present, the villains got a lot bolder. The yellow flash had used his speed to patrol the entire city several times every night, with him around attempting anything was a stupid endeavor. Now all they needed to worry about was regular heroes, none of them was competent enough to cover as much ground as the vigilante. Even if they tried hard, a lot of crimes still happened. They weren't as fast as him, they didn't put as much fear into villains like him. Their fear didn't stem from his heroic actions, it appeared from the ease with which he wiped out entire villainous organizations. His very name was enough to send shivers down a villain's spine. The lazy attitude he had while he was observed taking down villains, they already knew he was on par with all might. It was no longer a surprise, his age didn't matter much to them either, although it was a bit depressing for some of the more hardened villains to hear that they had been fearing a child. The situation was getting chaotic, to the point where even All Might needed to step in more often. At this point, most of the public hoped the Yellow Flash would return. Chapter 19, The Job. After our little talk, Nizu didn't waste much time. The very next day I was already being transported to UA. I have already seen this place from the outside. But I still can't help thinking that it's unnecessarily big. I was no longer cuffed, although they did put a small ankle bracelet on my leg to be able to locate me. Not that I couldn't get rid of it. It was some assurance for the authorities. It most likely also had a heartbeat sensor. The one in charge of me was the ever-energetic Aizawa. I swear this man looks more and more tired with each day that passes. I decided to strike up some conversation the only way I knew, by being annoying. So, what's with the bags under your eyes, been doing groceries lately? He absolutely ignored the last part, he calmly responded. With your absence, the streets have been getting busier at night. He was an underground hero now that I think about it, he usually acted at night. Damn, the years I was active must have been like a holiday for him. I was hoping villains wouldn't go apeshit without me keeping them in check. I lazily said. I wasn't really bothered by this, I knew I could get back to my patrols after getting my hands on a provisional license. Well, your presence was a lot more important in suppressing them than we first thought. They are going back to normal anyway, crime rates won't be zero but they still won't be like now. He was right, me being gone just gave them a massive boost in confidence. The novelty of it will soon be gone, and with heroes working overtime the situation was slowly getting under control. We kept chatting a bit, mainly me asking questions and him responding. After a while, I could see the wall of UA. Aizawa guided me through the campus and into the school buildings, giving me a quick tour before taking me to the principal's office. Most of what he showed me was just on the way, the rest he just mentioned in passing. As we got to the door I could hear some mumbling inside the room. I could sense Nizu and Toshinori being inside. Nizu on a boosted seat and Toshinori on a couch. There were quite a few things on my mind. I wanted to find out what I was going to be doing around here. Nizu didn't specify anything and I really didn't want to be a janitor. I mean, if I had no choice I would do it, but I wasn't gonna be happy about it. Aizawa opened the door and dragged me into the room, probably not wanting to waste any more time on his escort mission. I brought him, I need to go prepare for my next class now. After saying that he just left. Bringing me out of my stupor, Nizu greets me energetically. Hello, young Alan. I'm very glad to welcome you to UA. I hope Aizawa told you about some of the facilities around. He mentioned some stuff. There's just one thing I wasn't clarified of. I said, taking a pause, hoping Nizu would just catch on. He just looked at me expectantly. As if he didn't know what I meant. Sighing I continued, what exactly is my job here? He instantly replied, proving once more that he just wanted to see me struggle. Basically, you will be a combat instructor sparring partner for the hero course. He was really lively while talking. First you will start as a sparring partner, you will do some courses on the side about teaching. Like Toshinori on the couch there. He said while pointing to Skinny Might. Toshinori was really being awkward around me. I needed to break the ice. Taking on my usual lazy tone. I started speaking. Hey, aren't you the guy that's been training Midoriya? He immediately perked up, responding quickly. Oh yes, I thought you had forgotten about that. How's his progress been going? We kept going like that for a while. We talked a bit about his successor. He slowly became more relaxed during the conversation. Nizu just let us talk for a few minutes. He had probably noticed Toshinori's behavior too. He was highly intelligent after all. He was probably expecting me to do something like this. Now that my conversation with Toshinori was over, Nizu started again. We should talk about your provisional license. The government wanted me to test you thoroughly, but I don't think that is too necessary. Next week you will get a test. It will only have morality questions. A practical test is unneeded in this particular situation. Nizu had probably hoped to give me this license without any further formalities, but it seems that his hands were being forced in this situation. Well, I doubt the test will be an issue. Will I be allowed to go back on the streets after gaining the license? This was what had been bugging me for a while. I needed to know if I could still have my nightly routine. Well, that would be a bit more complicated. Nizu didn't look all that pleased while speaking about this. Toshinori also didn't look too comfortable at the mention of this. The court decided that even with a provisional license you still need to be supervised by either a police officer or a pro hero at all times, even while wearing that ankle bracelet. He took on a neutral tone this time. I was already expecting something to this level, but needing to have someone around me at all times would slow down my patrolling speed by a large margin. Is there no solution to this? Like wearing a live camera or something to that end? I still need to be able to cover the entire city if I want to be efficient. Nizu looked interested in my proposal. I could try to speak about this subject to them in the following week. But don't get your hopes up. You might need to have a supervisor around you for a while anyway. Well, at least I didn't get outright rejected. As long as my name is back on the streets, then crime would lower by default. It is a temporary solution, but it will have to do. All right, this talk has been interesting, Principal Sir, I said cheerfully. This talk had been a lot more interesting than I thought it would be. I learned enough to almost completely understand my situation. Things were moving along in the rate that I would hope for. I will have someone lead you to your dorm room. I recommend getting further familiarized with the campus and its infrastructure. After that, we said our goodbyes and I went on my way to my dorm. Guided by no other than Aizawa, I could tell by the sound of his gritting teeth that he wasn't all that pleased with being my guide. He probably just wanted to sleep right now, like always. I eventually reached my room, Aizawa finally being released from his duty, returning to prepare for his next class, which I already know means that he's going to sleep. I quickly followed his ways, testing my new bed and getting some rest. Chapter 20, Sparring. The next day I had already been called to Gym Gamma. My sparring partner duties were starting much sooner than I expected. When reaching the massive building I could only sigh. I'll have to be fighting trainees. I can only hope there are some fun ones in this class, otherwise, this will be such a boring job. Opening the massive door I could see about 40 students gathered there. Present Mike, Aizawa, and Gang Orca were present. Aizawa introduced me to the students. Your sparring partner today will be Alan here, some of you might know him already. He was quite famous as a vigilante, used to go by Yellow Flash. I decided to just wave at them. Looking closer at the crowd I could see 3 familiar faces, just as I had hoped. The big 3 were present in this group. The student group should be formed from classes 2A and 2B gathered here. They looked a bit confused at my introduction. I could hear some surprised murmurs among them. I guess some didn't know me. How did they miss the news in the last 4 years? Most should have heard of me at this point. There weren't many questions left for them, most already knew of me. They didn't look down on me because of my age. At first I want to see how you all fare fighting in a big group. Both classes will take turns to battle against Alan here. The group that survives for the least amount of time will do twice as much training today. Aizawa really liked turning things into competitions. Nat, it might just be necessary to create stronger heroes. The first group was 2A, this group had both Nejire Hato and Tamaki Amajiki. Don't remember much about their teammates, and the only thing I know about the quirks of the two either. Oh well, I'm sure I'll remember mid-fight. As soon as Aizawa gave me the go, I quickly started releasing light towards them. I used it to blind them momentarily. While they were shielding their eyes, I quickly solidified my light into tentacles and managed to wrap around 13 people with them. I had created this move specifically for fighting big groups. The only downside is that I need to touch the light to keep it solid. I had more lethal attacks in this manner, but they were not really good in a spar. Using my tentacles, I knocked out all the ones that I caught by hitting them with each other. I proceeded to use the downed students as ammunition to throw them at the remaining few. Both Nejire and Tamaki managed to avoid getting caught and hit with their colleagues. With them, the remaining group was about 5. What despicable methods! Mirio said on the side. His voice was really loud. Nejire quickly used her quirk to send a huge wave of energy my way. I avoided it with ease. Meanwhile, Tamaki tried to block my path by throwing one of the remaining students at me using his tentacles. The random student probably had a strength amplification quirk. He used the momentum Tamaki gave him to attempt a dropkick on me. While in the air, I grabbed his leg and turned his momentum against him, swinging him around and throwing him into a wall, in a continuous motion. As I turned around, Tamaki was already trying to wrap his tentacles around me. I'm sure I've seen this in a manga before. I said slowly. I moved backwards out of his attack range and kicked a light beam forward, exploding it near him and knocking him out. There were only 3 students left. They quickly huddled together, realizing that they had no chance to win. They tried to buy as much time as possible. That didn't work out so well. I appeared right in between them and knocked them out almost instantly. Nejire tried to react, but she didn't even have time to raise her hand. Overall, I don't think Nejire can fly yet. Even if she could, she couldn't have left her classmates' backs undefended. Tamaki was pretty strong. The rest were also good. But since I don't know their names, I can't tell much about them. Present Mike seemed to be taking some notes on their performance while Orca was guiding the injured to the infirmary. I'm sure Recovery Girl will be quite mad. At least their injuries are not serious at all. I was obviously going easy on them. Overall, the fight lasted for about a minute. Good time if you ask me. The next group fight ended about the same. Mirio managed to dodge some attacks, letting them pass through him. Sure, they weren't going anywhere near my top speed, but that doesn't mean he's any less impressive. My quirk has a lot more offensive ability than his. Now that I think about it, isn't my quirk also better than his in ignoring attacks? I mean, mine doesn't leave me naked. But I can't really go through the ground, so he has that over me. I guess overall, the first group lasted about 3 seconds more than the last. Meaning Togata now had to do double the training. He didn't look that mad about it though. For now, my job was done. Aizawa said I could go. Although I wanted to get to know the big 3, I knew I would get the opportunity when we would do 1v1s, or smaller group fights. Now I went back to my room. I had a lot of free time. Nizu already sent me some theory about teaching. I needed to get around to reading that. I couldn't wait to gain my license. I would need to contact Jiren. Can't really go there in person. I'll have to call him when I get a burner phone. I'm hoping All for One takes some form of action too, but I know he won't. Unless I attack him, he won't personally take action. He also has no nomus at this point. I guess I'll wait for his appearance next year. For now, I started reading the stuff Nizu sent me. Chapter 21, Training and Talking. POV Nejire. Today our teacher said we'd be doing a joint training session with our neighboring class. I was happy about that. We didn't know what the exercise would consist of. We certainly weren't expecting to do a group fight against Japan's most famous vigilante. Not everyone knew about his fight with All Might, but I had seen the news about his capture live. I had seen him fight All Might and the other pros. He was about our age, maybe a year younger. But he had enough strength to face off against the NR.1 pro hero. As Aizawa explained the rules, I could hear some people saying this was going to be easy. They clearly hadn't seen the fight between him and All Might. Maybe they only heard he got captured by him. But as the fight started, the same people that were confident were defeated almost instantly. My attacks were too slow to even hit him. Every wave I shot his way was just outright ignored or dodged. His attacks were too fast for us, but after remembering the footage of his fight against All Might, he is clearly holding back. In the end, even Tamaki got taken down in one hit. Now only me and my other two classmates. I couldn't fly up and leave them open from one side. The same instant I thought that I could see him with the corner of my eye. I didn't even have time to raise my hand before he knocked us all out. I woke up in the infirmary. None of my classmates was actually injured. I decided that I wanted to learn more about this Alan person. POVMC. A week passed quickly. Today was the day of my exam, meaning by tomorrow I'd be back on the streets, this time legally. There were quite a few things on my mind right now. Today I also need to help with at Gym Gamma again. I had asked for permission to use some of their training equipment, Nizu obviously accepted, but only outside work hours. So recently I restarted my daily training. I couldn't train for the same amount of time as before. I still had some stuff to study from Nizu. I also had to help the teachers around campus. Honestly, Nizu called me a sparring partner combat instructor, but I think the correct term for my actual position would be unpaid intern. None of the teachers ever asked me to bring them coffee. Thankfully, I would have blown it in their faces. The most I do is deliver files. 13 needed help with her rescue class yesterday. It was with the first years. I saw the interior of USJ, it was a lot more impressive looking in person. I didn't pay much attention to much else in there. 13 just wanted me there for a quick demonstration. She told me to rescue someone from the mountain slide zone. We just walked into the perimeter of the zone and the demonstration started. I just used my speed and perception to quickly reach the rescued party. It was a dummy. They only used actual people for tests apparently. I just grabbed it and flashed away back to the entrance of the zone. It took about 4 seconds in total. The students were somewhat surprised. I think this is Class 1B. Can't really recognize any of them. But I still said. If this were an actual person, I wouldn't be able to speed up that much. You should always be mindful of the person you carry. I still remind them to be mindful of the cargo during an escort mission. Basic gaming etiquette. Overall, I was having fun. The heroes were an interesting bunch of characters. Their attitudes were amusing to me. I loved making fun of Aizawa. Hisashi was a cool guy all around. 13 was a nice to talk to and polite, and Midnight was a bit weird. I didn't get to talk much with the rest of the teachers and staff. But I have time. I will be working here for a few years. Now I am heading to Gym Gamma. I think I'm meeting the second years again. This time Present Mike called me for it. When I entered the gym there was only Class 2A. The teachers with them were Ectoplasm, Cementos, and Mike obviously. I waved at them and greeted. Hello everybody, hope you didn't wait long for me. I was just fashionably late. I developed the habit of not always being on time in the last week. It helped me relax a bit on the way to work. Well, glad you finally showed up. Hisashi was always loud in his speech, might be due to his quirk. I could see that most students got used to his loud self. Today we will be doing special move training. The students looked excited at the prospect of special moves. They had probably done this before, so there wasn't any need for an introduction to the subject. Hisashi came near me to talk. Your work for today will be to supervise and give tips to the students. I nodded. He continued in a loud friendly tone. So, how has your first week here been? I heard you really shined in the rescue demonstration. It's been fun staying here. Say, how come Aizawa isn't around here? Hisashi seemed surprised by my question. Well, since he expelled his entire class this year, he has some free time compared to the rest of us. But not by much. He now takes care of Class 2B along with their homeroom teacher until next year. That made sense. Well, I'll go around and see if I can help the students with any tips. Hisashi just nodded and wished me good luck. I ran around the class for a while, helping where was possible. They were all second-year students, most already knew their quirks well enough. I could see Nejire flying around and hitting one of Ectoplasm's clones with her energy waves. I was curious about her quirk. I could only remember it had great stamina consumption. I flew closer to her platform and asked, "Hey, what's your name?" I couldn't just act like I already know her. She looked excited. "Oh, my name is Nejire Hato, you must be Alan." I think she got a bit distracted from the exercise. We talked for a bit, mainly about our quirks. I told her more about mine. She seemed genuinely curious about its abilities and limitations. Usually, someone asking so fervently about your strengths and weaknesses doesn't mean well. But I can remember her being a curious person. "Well, I've taken enough of your time. I'll leave you to your training." Saying that, I left her platform. I could already feel that I had taken a lot of time away from her training. "We can talk later at lunch sometime," she screamed in my direction. Couldn't see her face, I was already on the ground. She probably wants to know more about my quirk. I avoided giving her many details in our previous conversation. After that, there wasn't much for me to do. I had an exam to take now. Chapter 22, Exam and Good News. When I reached the classroom, Nizu messaged me about I could just sense Aizawa there. Probably irritated about something, like always. Well, fair enough, since I appeared he had less and less free time. He expelled his class, so now he's the go-to guy for errands in Nizu's eyes. Probably his way of punishing such major actions. Though I can tell Nizu believes in his employees' judgment. If Aizawa didn't consider someone hero-worthy, then that might not be. He's only taking some frustration out on the poor sleep-deprived hero because he probably had gotten some flack from the parents. He always ends up having to take care of me, whether it's being a chauffeur or a tour guide. Now he needed to give me the test Nizu had prepared for me. Entering the room, I lazily and jokingly greeted him. "Hey sleepbag, how are you doing?" He didn't even bother responding to my well-thought-out greeting. He just looked me in the eye and got right to the point. "The test is on one of the front row seats, good luck." Saying so, he strapped himself in his yellow sleeping bag and started resting his eyes. There were cameras in the room, so a supervisor was really just another formality. 1 hour later. Okay. Nizu is a sadistic person. The first page only had a children's crossword puzzle. I chuckled a bit at that. I thought the whole test would be a joke. The very next page was filled with problems that I had problems with, even with my previous life's college education. They were from all subjects, from math to morality. I think I hate the principal now. Now at the end of the allocated time, I go to hand in my paper. I wasn't even done answering most of the questions. And Aizawa tells me, "Oh, by the way, Nizu said to announce you that only the first page is necessary for passing." Even though his face was halfway covered by his scarf, I could tell by his tone. He was absolutely smug about it. I could tell from his eyes that he was really proud of his actions. I take back my previous statement. Nizu is alright, Aizawa is sadistic. He purposefully waited till the end, just to watch me struggle. In retrospect, I should have been kinder to him. But it's too late for that. I will get my revenge eraser. After the test, I went to Nizu's office. Knocking on the door like a civilized person. He told me to come in. After a quick greeting, I got straight to the point. "Nizu, I want to ask about the license. When will I get it?" "You most likely need to wait until tomorrow. If I just give it to you directly, people will question the validity of the test you were given." Fair enough. At least I don't have to wait much longer. But the next piece of news he told me about was quite decent. "I managed to talk about your camera idea to the court in charge of your case. They agreed to it, rather reluctantly I might add." He was a bit happy when he spoke. "You will receive a small bracelet, it has a 360 camera installed inside it. He started explaining more about the procedure. You will also don't need to worry about contacting the police to take a villain you have incapacitated. Since you will be monitored, you can just concentrate on your work. That was at least somewhat reassuring. Now I didn't have to worry about someone slowing me down. But Nizu continued. The bracelet will arrive next month. It's currently being made on Island. The police wanted a camera that could keep up with you and that could still take some damage. Well, I had hoped they had something in stock, but I guess I will have to be assigned a supervisor. I think they might want me back on the streets to scare the villains back into hiding. The heroes have been doing a decent job at suppressing the rising tide. But my presence could do so more efficiently. Well, do you have any idea who will be my partner for the next month? I was a bit curious about this. Well, as of now, the government has decided to put the number 17 hero on the clipboard. The rabbit hero, Mirko, will be your supervisor. This will be bad. From what I remember, she absolutely hates teaming up with others. Now I can only guess that she is being forced into this because otherwise, I can't see her accepting something like this. Well, that's interesting. Thanks for the help, Principal. I didn't want to talk about the test. It was already bad enough that Aizawa screwed with me. I thanked Nizu for his efforts and made my way out of his office. I remember her being fast, but I still think she will slow me down a bit. I didn't have much choice now. Becoming a licensed hero was going to take a while. But I couldn't have remained a vigilante. Since my first sighting on camera, I knew my identity was going to be discovered. I didn't want to become a runaway vigilante. That would be a lot more annoying than getting arrested. It would mean that, no matter how much I helped the public, both the police and the heroes would constantly try and catch me. With my strength, getting caught would be impossible. But I didn't want to deal with the authorities at every step of the day. I also want to have a future. I still want to go to high school and maybe college later. I can keep being a hero as a side gig. But I eventually want to get an actual job. Being a hero might be considered a profession in this world, but I don't want to spend my time fighting weak villains for the rest of my life. I needed something to do besides reading manga and heroing. My future looks good right now. The authorities will stop bothering me after a year or two. I will finish high school here, then I'll be completely free to do whatever. Chapter 23, Productivity. The day would pass quickly if I just waited and slept it out, but I didn't want to waste a perfectly fine day. I had some adjustments made to my hero costume, adding some utility belts and other tools. I asked the support division for help on that one. Power loader, I'll just call him Majima, anyway he was nice enough to not ask for anything in return. While at it I asked for a weighted vest for training, asking about the possibility of an adjustable set of weighted clothes. We do have the high-density weights. Attaching them to clothes might take a while. I'd have to find a sturdy enough material to be able to resist the increasing weight. He started mumbling a bit in the last part. He was most likely just speaking to himself. I waited a bit for him to finish. After a few minutes, he just looked at me and said, "Oh, you're still here at this point." You could see a vein burst on my forehead. Why were inventors always very eccentric, yet you still didn't tell me if it's possible to make the clothes? I said, calming myself a bit. Well, I can make a set of clothes with inner pockets for a special type of weight. You should be able to adjust it by adding weights and taking them off. Majima was still thinking about the possibilities of this idea. For now you can use some of the bracelets the teachers use in tests. They should be good enough for training. And so he gave 4 weights, I think I remember them now. Small metal bracelet with black rectangles surrounding the sides, each weight added about a quarter of the user's body weight. Majima proceeded to show me how to put them on and how they worked. Well, that's that. How much will the weighted clothes cost exactly? I still want to know if I can pull enough money to buy them when they're done. Equipment for the staff is free of charge, but I'd appreciate you coming to me when you get any other interesting idea. Well, at least that's covered. I still needed a source of income. Well, back to Nizu's office. I quickly said goodbye to Majima. I left wearing the weights. I could feel them somewhat, sapping at my stamina slowly. For now, I could ignore it. When I reached Nizu's office for the second time today, I knocked politely on the door. Entering, I could see him looking over some files. I greeted him with some cheerfulness. Hello, Principal Sir. I forgot to ask something the last time we talked. Well, ask away. Nizu said, looking at me. He was signing files at an impressive speed at the same time. I wanted to know if I would get paid for catching villains. I know the work I do around UA is classified as penal labor or whatever. But my hero activities shouldn't be affected by that, right? Well, in regards to your payment, like most heroes, you will get a monthly salary to form the government. The amount usually depends on your activity. Nizu was still signing papers while explaining these things to me. I can't help but think I'm bothering him somehow. Thank you for clarifying that. I wasn't really getting paid as a vigilante, so I don't really know how this stuff works. Saying that, I left his office, leaving him to his work. Nizu was probably doing something important. The second I left the room, I could sense him brushing his fur. I guess maintaining his fur still counts as important work for him. After that, I went to a gym inside the school grounds. I wanted to train a lot today. The weighted bracelets really gave me a boost in confidence. They made me feel like I was progressing. I didn't think I would ever miss the burning sensation in my arms after a day-long workout. Now I was heading to get something to eat. Lunch rush should still be at the canteen. That guy is a god. I don't care what the billboards say, he's my #1 hero. I ate quite a bit the first time I went to that canteen. The food was just too good. I almost ate myself into a coma. I had never tasted food that good in both my lives. Since my first experience there, the canteen had become my favorite place. Now I was sitting at a random table. This place was mostly empty. It was already evening. Most students were already in their dorms or at home. As I stood, I could hear an excited voice. I could sense none other than the big three all entering the canteen at the same time. The voice was obviously Nejire. Not many people could be that loud without a voice-related quirk. Togata instantly noticed me. I was quite a bit taller than the other students after all. After they got their food, they made their way to my table. Before they sat down, Nejire said, "Hey Alan, glad to meet you here." She's always a ball of excitement. Mirio was also somewhat mirroring her in that aspect. Tamaki was as shy as I remember him, just waving took a lot out of him. It's great to meet you guys. I talked to Nejire before, but I never had the chance to meet her friends. I said with a cordial smile. How come the three of you are still at school? I lived here, so this was normal for me, but I had never seen them at the canteen at this hour before. We decided to train a bit longer today. After you trounced us in the last group exercise, all of our classmates have been working harder. It seems my presence was also a motivating factor for young heroes. Nizu really got the bigger hand in our deal. Not that I mind, I was getting bored in that shitty cell. Realizing they were still standing while talking to me, I invited them to sit down. They were most likely waiting for me to do so. So, do you guys need any help with training? I'm not an expert, but I've trained myself quite a bit. I wanted to know how quickly they could progress. Seeing them as second years was quite nice. It gave me more time to observe their progress. I wanted to see just how far their quirks could go. I could use some tips. I want to somehow speed up my energy waves. Right now I need to get close to an enemy for them to be effective. Nejire was the only one to ask for help. Since my quirk is part emitter part transformation, I could give her a few tips. We can meet in our free time and train a bit. I usually spend it training anyway. Wouldn't mind having a partner for a while. I proposed. She seemed somewhat excited at the prospect. She accepted quickly. Sounds great. I still have some questions about your quirk. The conversation continued. We ate and talked for a while. Even after finishing our meal, we still continued sitting there. Eventually, we noticed that the sun was no longer in the sky. We got up. It's been nice, I seem to have held you three here for a while, I said with a lazy smile on my face. We should do this more often, maybe we can even train as a group. Mirio was really enjoying the conversation. Yet, Tamaki still didn't talk much, but I know he'll warm up to me eventually. Let's meet up again tomorrow. Nejire just had a lot more energy than us mortals, she didn't know tiredness. Just like that, we parted ways. I think we spent about 3 hours in the canteen. Thankfully lunch rush still had cleaning to do. He hadn't kicked us out yet. Really a great hero. With happy thoughts I headed to my bedroom and used my ultimate skill. The second my head touched my pillow I was out. Not even bothering to take my weights off. Chapter 24, First Night Out. The first thing I did after waking up was taking a quick shower. I needed to grab my costume from Majima. I also needed to grab my actual license from Nizu. After that, I would still need to work for a bit at UA. I'll be free to go outside in the evening. Well, I'll have Mirko tagging along. From what I remember she's pretty fast. I might not be able to cover the entire city, but at least half of it will be possible. I don't have much to do in UA right now, it's not like the hero course has training sessions every day. Although most students decide to train after hours, at least going by Mirio's word. After doing everything that was required for me at school I was prepared to go out. Nizu said I'd have to call a police dispatcher and inform him if I wanted to go out. Although they would know from the tracking ankle bracelet they put on me. I called the number Nizu gave me and they told me to wait in front of the gates at UA. They were probably going to send Rumi to pick me up and start the patrol. I waited there for a while, dressed in my costume. I should have expected her to be late. It's not like she loves the idea of having to supervise me. It technically meant that she now had a teammate, a concept she always detested. After a while I managed to see her. It's been an hour since the dispatcher told me to wait here. She looked rightfully pissed off. She didn't even bother greeting me or anything. She just started grumbling. I can't believe they made me babysit you. Her anger was directed at me, even though this wasn't really my fault. Well, nice to meet you. Or not. I wasn't going to be kind to her for no reason. Let's go. Don't get in my way and don't slow me down. Her comment ticked me off. I should be the one saying that. Just by being late here you already slowed me down. I wasn't going to be bossed around by her. I was a trained fighter and I had experience dealing with villains, probably as much as her if not more. At this point, she shouldn't have been a hero for more than 2 years. She should be 24 now, assuming she went to college. She most likely became a hero at 21 or 22 the latest. Meaning I was technically her senior in this. She was really pissed off about my comment. I just ignored her reaction and started the patrol. It quickly turned into a race however. She simply didn't want me to run in front of her. She kept speeding up until she passed me, which in turn made me speed up more, thinking we could patrol the streets faster. With my perception I could feel quite a bit of villain activity in the district. I decided to put a stop to as many as possible. I completely ignored Mirko's presence, dealing with the villains smoothly. She genuinely took this patrol as a challenge, trying to take down as many villains as possible. I contacted the dispatcher and told them to send all the heroes in the nearby districts somewhere else. I could take care of things here just fine, having more manpower in other districts would be better. They didn't want to listen to me at first, but then I reminded them that I had cleared much more than this by myself in the past. I hadn't seen this many villains around since my first patrols as a vigilante. It was a bit concerning for me. The second I take a break, villains start running rampant as if I don't exist anymore. Why are there so many of them? Do they respawn or something? My first patrol as a hero was eventful. I still needed to contact the dispatcher for every caught villain. I can't wait for that stupid camera to come. It's honestly as much of a bother as I remembered it to be. During this whole time, I didn't exchange a word with my temporary partner. She also didn't try to strike up any conversation. We didn't get a good first impression of each other. Before meeting her I still thought she would be agreeable, but now I think of her as an annoyance. I don't know her opinion on me, but from the few glances she gave my way it's probably the same. From time to time I could sense her smile. I don't really know her reason for smiling, but she certainly didn't want me to see it. Regardless, by the end of our patrol, Mirko was exhausted. Keeping up with my speed while fighting that many villains was a heavy task. I don't think many would be capable of that, maybe All Might could if he was still in his prime. Other than him, I remember Hawks having a lot of mobility. I don't think he has as much stamina as Mirko though. I think this was a productive night. There won't be as many villains on the streets next time. The media already picked up on my return. They were bound to make a few articles. Right now, I called my dispatcher and told them I was returning to UA. I didn't bother saying my goodbyes to Mirko. She just looked my way, still very tired. I was already on my way till something ticked. I took a pause, looking back at the rabbit hero. She couldn't even stand up anymore. She fainted there. In her effort to keep up with me, she completely disregarded her own well-being. I couldn't just leave her here. I decided to take her to a hospital. Recovery lady wouldn't be able to help. I doubt Mirko had any stamina left. Running with her on my back wasn't that hard. I created a few light ropes to hold her in place. I couldn't use my fastest speed, but I still reached the hospital in less than a minute. Entering the hospital, I called to the front desk for help and they brought a stretcher. I needed to call my dispatcher again. He probably noticed I had taken a different route to UA. I didn't need him to panic about me trying to run off. I didn't return to UA that night. I was a bit concerned at the state of my temporary partner. I didn't like her, but knowing her current state was my fault made me feel a bit guilty. I talked to the hospital staff and they agreed to let me spend more time there. I spent that night on a hospital chair near her bed. POV Rumi Usagiyama. I remember thinking this was going to be boring. I had only heard about this person in the past. He's supposed to be some big shot vigilante, but he is just a 15-year-old brat. So what if he's a bit taller than other kids his age? I thought the police was joking around when telling me to be cautious. Now I know why they were so serious. He extremely fast. Keeping up with him is very hard. But I don't want to show any weakness. He angered me really badly when saying I was holding him back. But, no matter how much I tried, I always ended up behind him. It didn't make me feel discouraged, it only made me want to work harder. Every time I sped up a bit he would become even faster. As if he was scaling his level to my own. The very notion of me holding him back made me rage, it made me go even faster. The pace at which he defeated villains was impossible for me to replicate. Even when trying my best I couldn't even reach half of his number. Most villains didn't even have time to blink. He only showcased his true speed when taking them down. Subconsciously, a smile made its way to my lips. I didn't let him see it. If I saw him even beginning to turn, I suppressed it. I couldn't let him see I was enjoying this. I could feel myself get stronger. Every time he sped up I felt motivated to break through my limits. By the end, I couldn't even move a muscle. I could feel my heart beating out of my chest. Even with my heightened tolerance, I could feel every muscle in my body burning in pain. Before I could utter any word I fell to the ground. I saw was him going back towards UA. I think he didn't notice me falling to the ground. I knew this was serious. I was clinging with all of my willpower just to stay conscious. If I fainted I was afraid I wouldn't wake up. But in my state, I couldn't even scream for help, let alone press my emergency signal. I saw him rushing back here, probably noticing something wrong. He acted quickly, strapping my unmoving body to his back and rushing me to a hospital. The second I hit the stretcher I knew I was going to be fine. His face was the last thing on my mind. It was filled with concern, something I didn't think I would see from anyone besides my family. It gave me a warm feeling. With these happy thoughts, I drifted away. Chapter 25, Day Off. When I woke up Mirko was still sleeping. I was getting thirsty and hungry. I decided to go out and grab some water. I hadn't drunk anything since yesterday afternoon. I also brought a bottle back and put it on the nightstand near her head. The doctors said physical exhaustion combined with lack of hydration made the situation a lot worse than it was supposed to be. Right now she was being kept hydrated through an infusion. I think she would sleep through most of this day, at least that was the estimation the doctors gave. I can't stay here much longer, I need to get back to UA. Or I can just call Nizu, tell him of my circumstances and get a day off. I'm leaning more towards the second option, taking a day off sounds really nice. Nizu can't really refuse since that would make him look like a bad person. Blackmail works wonders. I also needed to get some things done. I was being tracked, so there wasn't any need to worry about the police getting anxious. I decided to go get some food. I still ended up calling the dispatcher to inform him of my actions. Don't want to make the whole police force send their people to me because I felt like eating pizza. But the pizza wasn't the only thing I was buying. I also bought a burner phone. I still needed to contact Jiren later. I also made sure to buy it with cash from a shady place. The shadier they are, the less likely they are to keep records of this stuff. The shop also happens to be in the alleyways towards my favorite pizza place. Of course, I chose that place for this reason explicitly. Getting information about Trigger is a lot more important than a pizza. I think Trigger will appear on the black market in the next few months. All I needed to do was to follow one of the thugs that deal these drugs to their base. Since I can't remember much about the location of mhaisekai, I can only get creative. I don't want to wait a long time to take them down and rescue Eri. I couldn't wait for the League of Villains to make their first appearance. I was really hoping for it to happen faster, but I guess my presence didn't make All for One hurry his plans at all. Getting that crazy doctor out of hiding would be much easier after taking down his boss. I have a course of action for that. It could only be done after the attack on USJ, unfortunately. So, back to waiting. At this point, even training is a formality. I was already stronger than All Might by a large margin. By this world's standards, I was at the peak. Right now Overhaul and his crew aren't a threat to me, I was more concerned about how I was going to raid them. Currently, Mirko is out of commission. She will be for about a week. She would normally need months to recover from her current state. But healing quirks made her recovery much faster. I needed to talk to Nizu about this. I just started hunting villains again. I didn't want to take a break already. But I probably will need to. Mirko was one of the few people that could reach a satisfactory speed in my eyes. If they sent a slower hero to replace her, I would just take a break. But even when she recovers, I'll need to convince her to join me in raiding a highly dangerous villain group. Knowing her, she would most likely accept, but she would still inform the police, which would make them form a squad, something that would slow down my operation by a lot. Well, I'll deal with the problems as they come. Right now, still in my hero costume, I was walking down the streets. I didn't take the back streets when heading back to the hospital. I could feel a lot of gazes sent my way. I already knew I was a bit famous. But this made me feel a bit awkward. Maybe this is why famous people wear masks. I managed to ignore the stares, making my way back to the hospital with a pizza box in hand. Refraining from saying pizza time at the front desk, I walked back to Mirko's room. This was going to be a boring and relaxing day. Even with my weights on. POV Rumi Usagi-yama. The first thing I saw when waking up was an unfamiliar ceiling. Slowly the memories of came back to me. I had passed out in the hospital. I have never been exhausted to that extent. Right now I can't even feel a muscle. Looking around, I could see a bottle of water on my nightstand to my right. I couldn't move my body, so I could only look at it for now. Even looking is hard, I can only move my neck a bit. I stayed there for a while. At this point I think I can talk. Just as I was about to scream a bit, I heard a door open. I couldn't move my head enough to see who was coming in. I however instantly recognize his voice. "Oh, you woke up already? You've been out for a day already." It was just as lazy sounding as ever, it calmed me down a bit. I didn't like feeling this vulnerable. Before I responded, he entered my field of view. He was carrying a pizza box. The sight of him was somewhat relaxing, but what surprised me the most was the fact that he was still dressed in his hero costume. That could only mean he had spent the night here. That warm feeling from last night came back. "How come you're here?" I couldn't hide the smile on my face while saying this. "Well, I took a day off to look after you. Not really needed since you're in a hospital." He also gave a kind smile while saying that. Honestly, I didn't hear much of the second part. I was stuck on the fact that he took a day off to check up on me. He also didn't mention that he spent the night here. I feel myself turning red at this. Could this mean he didn't want me to worry about him? He just forgot about it. Seeing me like that made him panic. "Hey, are you getting a fever?" His concern only made it worse. "Hold on, I'll give you some water." Saying that, he lifted my head gently, opened the water bottle on the nightstand and brought it to my lips. "The doctor did say your mouth might get dry at some point. Since you can't move, I'll help you out for now." I would usually be angry at someone for doing this kind of thing, but I couldn't help to feel safe right now. My condition made me vulnerable, but his presence gave me a lot of confidence. After drinking some water, I said, "Thank you." It was short and quiet. But I'm sure he heard it. He smiled brightly and simply said, "You're welcome." He proceeded to feed me a slice of pizza too. After a while, he told me to go back to sleep. The doctors would check on my condition later. Once again I fell asleep with a smile. Chapter 26, Training and Defeat. Leaving Mirko's room, I couldn't help but think her behavior was a bit weird. Even if she is a bit moved at me helping her, she is the complete opposite of yesterday. I guess she'll return to normal after she recovers. Right now, I was heading back to UA. Since she's awake, there's no need for me to stick around for long. I would just visit her occasionally. Now I wanted to train with the big three. I had promised I would at some point. I started heading to my dorm first. I needed a shower after 2 days of activity. Calling Jiren would also be nice, but it's not that urgent right now. The drug shouldn't be circulating yet. After my shower, I headed to Gym Gamma. Mirio said that's where most of the students train in their free time, either in groups or alone. Upon entering, I couldn't help but notice there were quite a few students present. If I didn't know any better, I would think I had just walked into their class. But classes were over for a while now. Seems Mirio wasn't joking when he said that most students practice here. In the room, I could see at least 50 people. Meaning there were students from both the second and third year here. Between them, I could see 3 people training together. Obviously the big 3. What other groups would I really care about enough to notice? I don't know if they are actually officially called that yet. Regardless, they are still at the top of the student body. Heading in their direction, I could feel some gazes on me, maybe some students wanting a rematch from last time. The gazes stopped eventually, probably returning to their own training. Reaching the group, Mirio was the first one to notice my presence. "Alan, great to see you here," he said with a wide smile. "Well, you did say we should train together at some point." I didn't sound as excited, but I was still in a good mood. Suddenly I could hear a voice from above. "Oh! Alan, you came." It obviously belonged to Nejire. I could honestly hear the smile on her face. She was currently floating around, probably attempting to increase her speed and mobility. I just waved at her, with a smile of my own. Tamaki was just quietly saying hi. I responded by flashing to his side and patting him on the back. An action that seemed to do a lot more harm than good. He got so startled that he jumped away from me. "I'm glad we have a chance to train together." Mirio was the one speaking now, completely ignoring what just happened. Nejire was still floating around. Tamaki was also doing his own thing. "It's nice being here. Last time we talked we didn't really decide on an hour to train. Figured I could just show up anytime." My smile couldn't be as wide as his, it simply wasn't biologically possible. During our small talk, Nejire came down to the earth. She's still an airhead, but at least her feet were on the ground. Alan, let's spar again. Well, sparring was a good form of training. Mirio also looked excited at the prospect. Tamaki started looking serious. He was only shy in social situations, just like Nejire was an airhead anywhere besides in a fight. Okay, you three will form a team and fight me. I will not use the speed part of my quirk. It's a bit disappointing to hear you say that, Mirio said while scratching the back of his head. Without adding much else to the conditions of the fight, we all took some distance. Since I was restricting myself to this extent, I could only use my quirk as an offense and defense. Mirio started the countdown. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Start. He immediately took his stance, Nejire immediately flying into the air. Tamaki just waited for me to make the first move. Now, my movement speed wasn't going to be used in this fight, but my attacks were still much faster than theirs. As soon as I heard Mirio give us the go, I sent a ray of light into the ground through my leg. It traveled through the ground until it was underneath them. The second Mirio blinked, I made the light exit the ground, solidified into spikes. I had made the point blunt, so as to not actually pierce them. Mirio managed to react in time, letting the attack pass through him. Tamaki managed to jump back, avoiding a few spikes. I rose more under him, their speed was too much for him already. He tried to block one by turning his hand into a shell, but the spike cracked his shell and knocked him out. Nejire was a bit slow to react, she sent quite a few waves towards me, making me move from my current spot and losing contact with the light I had sent into the ground, dispersing it. Her waves were still dodgeable. I quickly made a bow out of light, creating an arrow on the palm of my hand and taking aim. Mirio quickly came out of the ground, completely naked, and tried to punch me in the face. I quickly ducked and turned the bow into a staff. A close quarters fight might be what he was looking for. He was phasing through most of my attacks, I was blocking and dodging. Nejire was sending waves, blocking my escape paths. I could easily just take the attacks, I was still a Logia, but it would honestly feel like cheating. While swinging my staff, Mirio made a mistake, he dodged backwards. I quickly extended the length of my staff and whacked him over the head with it. Seeing him fall to the ground was satisfying, most likely because it was a good fight. Now the only one left was Nejire. Since she was flying, she was keeping her distance from me. Usually, she would get close for her waves to be less dodgeable, but now she was probably hoping to tire me out. Not a bad plan. The continuous dodging coupled with my weights would eventually become exhausting. These were, as Shigaraki called Class 1A, the golden eggs of their generation. I quickly reformed my bow while dodging. Aiming would be hard if I just kept dodging her waves, so I formed a sphere of light around me. I could already block punches from All Might. Nejire's waves wouldn't be that bad in comparison. The second one of her attacks passed me. I created a small gap into the sphere, shooting my arrow towards her. The second the arrow left my grasp, it turned into a ray of light. The bow was mostly a cosmetic, honestly. I didn't even know how to use one properly. She was dodging around, but I wasn't trying to hit her directly. The arrow went about 1 meter above her. The second it reached her, it exploded. Not an extremely big explosion, just enough force to knock her out of the air. It worked wonders. The explosion sent her flying towards the ground. I quickly flashed at her and caught her. The fight was already over, no reason to let her hit the ground. I placed all three of them on the ground, neither was that badly injured. I gave them about 10 to 15 minutes to wake up. The first one to wake up was Tamaki. He was also the first one to be taken out. He looked a bit ashamed. Don't feel too bad, my attacks were a bit difficult. But you still reacted in time. If you had something stronger to block it, you would have made it out. I was never good at comforting people. But he seemed to appreciate the attempt, disregarding how bad it was. Muttering a small thank you. Having a rare smile was on his face. Both Nejire and Mirio woke up at the same time. They both were a bit shaken. Getting hit in the head was most likely the cause. Maybe we should still take them to recovery lady. Tamaki made a logical suggestion. Yeah, that sounds about right. I was afraid of what was to come. I left for the infirmary. Tamaki carried Mirio and I carried Nejire. After placing them on the beds, I turned around and saw a furious recovery lady. I had hoped to avoid this beating, but here it is. I made my head solid as it received the cane from the old hero. It was my fault. I was trying to speak as the beating continued. It didn't matter how strong I became, I still fell victim to her rage. Tamaki looked on in horror, as she was defeating me. Mirio and Nejire just found it amusing. I eventually managed to escape, saying my goodbyes to them and leaving, albeit with a few bumps on my head. I quickly reached my room and drifted off to a much-needed sleep. I'd have time to worry about things later. Chapter 27, Media and Patrol. It's already been a week since my first patrol. Looking back, I spent most of this time training sparring with the big three and visiting Rumi. Figured I might as well, the authorities didn't really try to stop me. My outings have turned from asking for permission to go out to just saying that I'm going out. I still wear the tracking bracelet though. The main reason they leave me this much leverage is because of my presence in the media. The second I returned to the streets, the police made sure every news station and journalist knew about it. They proceeded to spread this information on every screen possible. That, coupled with the growing presence of All Might and Musuda 4, made the city almost crime-free, again. Nothing is perfect, the usual detractors will always be there, but most of the city was safe. This kind of influence was already too much. If they didn't give me any liberties after my work, then the public might be outraged. Since this was a very public case, most people know about my stay at UA. They also know that I'm working here. Sometimes I could sense a few reporters at the gate, probably hoping to catch a photo of me leaving UA. News about me were already quite hot. Imagine the swarm that will come when they learn about All Might working here. Regardless, patrolling the streets here wouldn't be much fun or productive. There weren't many villains left to catch in this place. Therefore, I started to plan on patrolling other cities. Most people wouldn't really be out late at night. It was a world filled with villains. Most knew better than that. There shouldn't be anything other than thugs on the streets. One place I had in mind was the Kamino district. But I think I should hold off on that one for now. All for one had Kurogiri and that annoying warp. I didn't want him to escape. I also wanted to see how my presence affected the storyline. After talking with the police for a bit, they agreed. They would inform Rumi about this change and prepare a method of transportation, train most likely. Now I am once again at my favorite place, the canteen. After eating, I plan to go out on patrol. It will be much slower this time. I don't really want a repeat of last time. I haven't seen my sparring partners around this place, only that one time. I guess they're still training. Our timetables don't collide often, we only meet occasionally for training, about 3 times this past week. After quickly finishing my meal and thanking Lunch Rush for it, I left towards the entrance. I was still a bit early, about half an hour to be exact, but I wasn't against waiting for a while. What I wasn't expecting to see was Rumi. She was already waiting at the gates. I wasn't expecting her to come late again. But my expectations of seeing her early were much lower. It reminds me of her weird acting during the first days of her hospital stay. I wasn't going to ask much about it. I don't know what is going on inside her head. I flashed behind her and tapped her shoulder and greeted her. Hey! Hello Rumi, have you been here long? I had stopped calling her Mirko in conversations, it just seemed weird for me to do. Since she didn't call me by my hero name either. She was startled a bit by my sudden appearance. But she recovered almost instantly. Hello Alan, I just arrived here myself, figured I'd be a bit early today. Especially since I was really late last time. At least she was acting more confident than in the hospital. Were you informed about the location change? I hope I don't have to fill her in about this. Yeah, let's start heading towards the train station. We're still early so there's no need to rush. She said that while waving some train tickets in front of me. We slowly made our way to the train station. The train we were supposed to get on was in 2 hours, we had ample time. We didn't even bother running. It was more like a jog on rooftops. When we reached the station we just sat down for a while. We still needed to wait for an hour and a bit. So, how are you feeling lately? I couldn't just ignore her this time, she seemed to be quite nice this time around. Oh, I'm fine. It wasn't that big of a deal anyway. I was mostly recovered 3 days after waking up. They kept me there for tests mostly. I already knew most of that. I did visit her the entire week. We made some small talk for a while. But most of the time was spent in silence until she had this idea. Hey, we should start training together. I didn't really know what I was expecting. She had this wide smile on her face. She wasn't really asking, this was more of a proposition than a question. I couldn't help but smile while seeing her like that. Sure, I still have quite a lot of free time on my hands. I wasn't going to train with the big three all the time anyway. Rumi was also stronger, she would prove to be a better workout than them. Seeing me accept her proposal made her quite excited, she was likely excited to fight someone strong. At least I think so, she's quite a complicated person. We didn't talk much after that, she seemed to be in her own world for a while. I also had my own thoughts, like what to do when I was bored. I still had a lot of stuff I could do. But one thing on my mind lately was recreating One Piece in this world. It is the only story I have any confidence in writing. I'm still worried about the ending, but I think I can make some stuff up. It won't be the same quality. I wanted to become a mangaka for a while now. Not the greatest profession, but I want to see how a story about piracy would be received in this climate. In this world, most stories were about heroes and villains. Mostly because people without strength fantasized about being heroes. I'll probably start writing it later. The drawing doesn't have to be perfect. The patrol itself wasn't anything new. The only different thing about it was that I didn't know the streets that well. Today was much slower, it was quite relaxing even. There weren't that many villains in this city. There were even less after news about our patrol started circulating. During this time Rumi and I exchanged few words. She is probably looking forward to our training. Her opinion on teams didn't change one bit, she still preferred to do her own thing. But at least she didn't see me as a nuisance anymore. The night ended without any events, quite boring in my opinion. Saying my goodbyes to Rumi and heading home. Going to sleep remains the highlight of my day. Chapter 28, Fighting and Progress. Time skip 3 months. Tomorrow is a big day for me. I heard the canteen was serving a new type of lasagna. Lunch Rush just came back from a short holiday to Italy, where he learned a few new recipes. I have missed him greatly during this time, my days seemed so bleak without his amazing food. In the past few weeks, some interesting things happened. I started training with Rumi, we now spend most of our free time training. At first, we just wanted to train once or twice a week, but then the big three, my only other friends at this point, had some exams and couldn't train with me anymore. Rumi and I mostly trained in a forest. The one closest to the city. Don't really remember if it had any name. I also contacted Jiren for the first time in a while. The drug still didn't make an appearance. Jiren himself is a bit skeptical about whether or not such a drug exists in the first place, but he's getting paid. I think it will appear pretty soon. I had quite a bit of money now, who knew the government is so generous to heroes? Might just be because I have a lot of cases per month. Right now, I still haven't decided if I should publish One Piece. I had made a few chapters, the art is dogshit, but the story is good, mostly because it isn't really mine. If I wasn't such an autistic fanboy in my previous life I wouldn't even bother trying to copy a story this long. Thankfully I have read it about 68 times in my past life. I have also received the live feed bracelet a while back. But I still patrol with Rumi quite often, as much as she hates that word. We are a team now. Recently my quirk has been getting stronger and stronger, growing alongside my physical body. Majima had finished the weighted training clothes. At first, they weren't that great, couldn't hold much weight, clung too tight to the body, but he keeps making more and more adjustments to them. In the beginning, they were putting quite the strain on my body. Now I wear them every day. I ordered about 5 pairs, to avoid wearing dirty clothes. I even asked for a version I could wear under my hero costume. Majima was really pleased with his product. He started advertising these as training equipment to the students and teachers. 1 pair is free. If you want more you need to buy them. I think Mirio also wears his pair all the time. It took off with most male students. In fact, very few girls actually used it. They had more baggage than the guys. It made the training clothes stuffy. I believe Majima is still working on a female-friendly version. I'll probably buy one for Rumi. During our training, she just wears regular gym clothes. She also took to wearing high-density weight bracelets. I bought a set for her after my first salary as a hero. She has already gotten accustomed to them. Lately, Rumi has been showing quite a bit of progress, not as much as me, but still a lot. I believe that the only thing holding her back is the lack of action. We didn't have an encounter with any dangerous villain for a long time. The only redeemable one was a guy with a mantis quirk, and he was just quick enough to prove troublesome for Rumi. I obviously let her handle him, no point in hogging all the fun. During tough fights, she enjoys the adrenaline. However, her smile widens the most when fighting me. Thinking back, she really hates when I'm distracted in our spars. Maybe I should pay more attention to her. Raising my hand and solidifying some light on my palm, I caught a downward kick coming from above my head. I could somewhat feel it. It wasn't painful, more like a small vibration going up and down my arm. Looking above I could see an angry bunny with a thirst for blood. Pay attention. She was usually loud during fights. But that didn't mean I hated it. Her loudness can be quite nice from time to time. Especially when I'm deep in thought. Sorry, I'm still thinking about food, I said with a lazy smile. I was purposefully trying to make her angry. HMPF furrowing her brows, she rotated in the air and drove a heel towards my face. Letting go of her other leg I quickly moved to the right. She always had this serious face on during training. Whenever she got mad at my laziness or lack of attention she would get even more motivated for some reason. Since I liked seeing her like that, oozing determination, I decide to anger her as often as I can. Using her greatest speed, she rushed me again. This time she kept herself on the ground, most likely to gain a proper foothold. She performed a roundhouse kick. I met hers with one of my own, covering my leg in highly solidified light. I developed this during our spars. I call it poor man's armament. It forms a shield around my skin and absorbs a lot of the impact. We were locked in that stalemate for a bit. As long as I don't use a lot of speed from my quirk, me and Rumi have about the same power output. After all, speed is power. Now I believe I could kick at speeds close to that of light, aided by my poor man's armament of course. She was the one to give in first, pulling her leg back and stumbling a bit, falling to the ground and laying for a bit. You really have a lot of energy. She was exhausted. We have been going at it for 3 hours now. I was also a bit winded, but that might be the weights talking. We should take a break. Let's start heading back. I only extended her a hand and got her up. She didn't need to be coddled. She wasn't really that squishy. It's already getting late. As I was saying that, she was falling to the ground again. This time I caught her. She had that damned smile on her face, not adrenaline filled this time, just mischievous. I guess I'm too tired today. Carry me. Again, she wasn't asking. It has become a tradition at this point. If she's too exhausted I have to carry her back to her apartment, where she proceeds to walk just fine into her house. Sometimes I feel she's just pretending to be tired. Seriously, oh well. Saying that I put her on my back, she put her arms around my neck and straddled my back. Now, from her grip I can tell she has quite a bit of strength left, but I'm sure that's just my imagination. The veins popping on my forehead were just as imaginary. But I would put up with her. For all the complaining I did, I still found her quite nice. Her energy, her confidence, even her smile that I keep mentioning, it can all be quite intoxicating. There wasn't anything romantic going on between us, most likely because of the age gap. I wasn't really bothered much by it, I was a lot older mentally anyway. But it was probably conflicting for her. I was still 15, 16 in a few months. I will just go with the flow in this case, even if I have to wait for a while. At least I didn't look like a teen. Anyone looking at me would say I'm between 20 to 25, and from the psychological evaluations I did a while back, I was also a lot more mature than most teenagers. They said my mental age was around 33. I headed back to her apartment and dropped her off, and like usual, she walked just fine from her doorstep onwards. I proceeded to say my goodbyes and head back to UA. I had a lot of sleeping to do. Patrolling daily simply wasn't necessary anymore. Going to other cities was also too time-consuming. I only did it with Rumi. Chapter 29, Trigger Ed. POV Rumi Usagi-yama. As soon as Alan closed the door I went and sat on my couch. Our interactions might not seem strained, but I can't help but feel sad about it from time to time. It's clear enough that he likes me, but I can't really bring myself to talk about it. He can probably feel my hesitation. I try to hide it a lot. But he is quite perceptive. He has never acted like a brat, nor does he look like one. Legally it should be fine, but I still feel unease. Our training has been progressing nicely. I have been feeling less and less tired every day until he bought me those weights, the first present he ever gave me. Now I wear them everywhere, besides on patrols. Even after he was told he no longer needed a supervisor, he still kept calling me on patrols in the cities around Musutafu. I obviously accepted. I always hated teams, but we don't really act like a team. We are partners sure, but we always compete. We don't really work together at all during missions. He wins most competitions, I only win when he is training rather than competing. When doing so he slows himself down to his opponent's speed and fights them on a more even field. Seeing him like that always gets me excited. He is lazy in everything but training. Otherwise, he would have never reached his current strength. I always look forward to training with him. The adrenaline rush I usually get in life-threatening situations is not that great in comparison. Although I know Alan won't harm me, I still get excited. Every step that I take might lead to my loss. One moment he is moving slowly, the next my eyes can't even follow him. Having him carry me was just a type of punishment I came up with. It's a bit selfish for me, but I think he doesn't mind it. If he did he would have said something. I can't help but feel that I'm leading him on due to my indecisiveness. This isn't like me at all. But we have time. We've only been partners for a few months. POV Alan. After waking up I decided to call Jiren. There are quite a few things I need from him now. I think he already started working with the league. I started working with him because I know his character. Unlike most people in his profession he has standards, a true professional you might say. He may be a shrewd businessman, but he wasn't scum. Now, I and Jiren aren't really friends, more like acquaintances, but we are also business partners, to some extent. As a vigilante, I didn't have a lot of money. So I ended up clearing some villain groups that made trouble for him. It was the usual drug dealer that wanted a piece of his turf and stuff of that nature. He thanked me with information. We made that deal so we don't owe each other any favors. Owing favors in the underworld is a lot worse than owing money to a loan shark. If you aren't careful you will be exploited. Usually, information isn't that expensive, but for me catching villains is extremely easy. It's a lot easier than retail work. But Jiren would feel that he owes me if he didn't give me more. So he started paying me to deal with some of them. His payments were where most of my funds came from as a vigilante since my other part-time jobs were shit. I usually only agreed because I want to keep our relationship steady. I wasn't worried about this information ever going public. He wouldn't disclose any information about his clients or business partners, and out of respect, I also never even bothered asking about his other clients. I remember him being extremely professional. Even when he was tortured he kept quiet about his contacts. Now I called him to ask about Trigger again. Trigger was an annoying topic for him, he didn't really believe me one bit. Probably thinking I was wasting his time. But he still checked it seriously, if he didn't then he would feel that he owed me. I called him and we started talking a bit. Hearing Jiren talk about random problematic villains was just great. He was likely hoping for me to drop by Kamino district and take care of them. So anyway I checked on this drug Trigger again. He finally got to the point. I haven't managed to find anything by that name, but I heard some rumors about a quirk-enhancing drug. He took a pause, giving me some time to process this. Trigger was coming soon, I was getting excited. It matches the description you gave. I don't know its name but it will hit the market soon. He was probably a bit surprised about my knowledge of the drug, but he worked long enough in this business to know not to ask those questions. I see, keep me informed on it, please. If you could arrange a deal with them it would also be helpful. This was what Jiren was best at, with his network finding out more about the mhaisekai wouldn't be impossible. But it would put him in needless danger, it would likely paint a target on his back. If he was just interested in the drug, then it wasn't that incriminating, Overhaul wouldn't come after him. All he needed to do was act like he was a customer interested in his product. I'll see what I can do. I will contact you soon. Saying that he hung up. My cooperation with Jiren was profitable for both of us, right now he should be considering how involved he should get with my request. Since he doesn't owe me anything he can always turn down the more difficult parts. Regardless, the second Trigger hit the market I would find a way. I'm 100% rating their compound. Even if I have to do it by myself. I'm reluctant to ask Rumi for help, she will most likely notify the police. And that would waste even more time, but it's not like I can hide it. I'm still wearing the tracking bracelet. I will worry about all of that later. Now, I must head to the canteen. The only place where I can feel at home besides my bedroom. I will be the first one to taste that lasagna, I don't care how many people I must step on. Chapter 30, Raid Shadow Legends. It's already been 3 weeks since Jiren told me about the appearance of the drug, after that it proceeded to get banned all over the world, and last week it was banned in Japan. I'll never understand how banning a drug would affect people that already buy most of their stuff from alternate sources. But Trigger was already dangerous even without villains using it. It makes your quirk stronger but it weakens your sense of reason. I don't even know how this drug managed to get approved in the first place. They usually test them before releasing them to the public. But that isn't my problem. Jiren managed to score a meeting with a distributor to talk about prices and supply. He isn't all that interested, but he's decided to do me a solid. In exchange for taking down another group that's bothering him, of course. I was obviously present to watch, from a distance of course. I traveled all the way to Tokyo for this meeting, telling my dispatcher that I was going on a holiday. Jiren was also a bit annoyed that he needed to travel a bit, but playing poker on the train with him was fun. But he got over the travel time quickly, he does this kind of stuff for a living. When he reached the building that the meeting was planned in, I could already feel some people inside. They are most likely just some thugs Overhaul sent to give more details about the deal. Now all I needed to do was to follow the thug, but I couldn't use my quirk too much since it's bright and not that good for stealth. I followed them quietly to the entrance of the labyrinth. Then I flew towards their main compound using my perception to follow the underground tunnels. I managed to follow them right back to their compound. The thugs he sent weren't exactly trained enough to notice that they were being followed. Now, I've decided to talk about this matter with Rumi, after about 4 months of working and training together it would feel inadequate if I kept this type of thing from her. But I don't think she is unable to protect herself, bringing her along should be fine. Taking out my phone and calling her. At this point, I had her number on speed dial. She took a while to pick up the phone. After a quick greeting and a few questions. "Hey, Rumi. I'm about to go on a raid to a Yakuza compound, you wanna join?" I got straight to the point, I was already in front of their compound after all. "I have something planned already." "Why, do you need any help?" "Well, that's sad. I don't remember her talking about anything planned during our training 2 days ago. I was actually excited to fight alongside her. I had already planned how we would distribute the villains and how we were going to attack from different sides." "No, it's fine. Have a fun day." My response probably feels a bit off, but this is the first time she ever refused to meet up with me. I hung up after saying that, maybe I should call her out on a date from time to time. I never call her on unrelated stuff, taking a break would be nice. Well, that makes things more boring than they have to be. But I still need to save Eri. At this point, a straightforward approach would work best, since my quirk isn't suited for an infiltration. I will just fly in their compound. They don't seem to have aerial defenses. At least I can't remember if they did. So I turned into a ray of light and crashed through the roof of their main building. The first people that came to check the disturbance were Kendo Rappa and a few dozen thugs. I didn't really remember all of the members of mhaisekai. But I remember this guy having a nice quirk. Not that it matters, I don't have time for games. I quickly took him out with a well-placed laser beam. It went through his stomach and exploded in the middle of the thugs behind him. I remember him being durable, so I quickly kicked him through the compound and out its gate. I don't think he will be moving anytime soon, or ever, but he's a villain so I don't care. Out of the few dozen thugs, only about 6 remained, most were hit face-on with the explosion, we were in an enclosed hallway after all. I wasted no time in knocking them down. I quickly traveled using my senses. I needed to cut off their escape routes. This place had a lot of tunnels underneath, forming a labyrinth. I moved at my fastest speed and found their meeting room. Here were the rest of the 8 bullets along with Mimic. I could feel chronostasis and overhaul in the basement. I quickly used Yasakani no Megatama, it pierced through the unsuspecting villains and took out all of them. Some lost a limb, some were paralyzed. I don't really care what happens to them at this point. I rushed underground, using a light tendril to dig into the ground at great speed. When reaching Overhaul and his right-hand man I broke into the wall and traveled through the tendril into his room. I slowed down this time. The raid was practically over, it had taken 2 minutes and 14 seconds. With these 2 in front of me, there was no escape for them, mhaisekai was over. They recognized me instantly, my name wasn't exactly a joking matter for villains. Overhaul was panicking a bit, but he managed to calm down. Chronostasis was just as surprised, but he recovered much quicker and said, "How did you get in here?" as if that wasn't obvious. "Well, after being greeted so politely in your little base I decided to visit the leader and have some tea with him," I said kindly. I was going to play around with them a bit. Give them some hope. I think I could hear Hall mutter something about useless subordinates. I think we can come to an understanding. Yellow flash. Oh, it seems Chisaki was trying really hard. I almost pity him. I absolutely ignored his rant about how this quirk is plagued and quirks are a sickness or some shit. I was really getting bored just looking at him rabble on about how great the world used to be and how quirks are ped his wife or whatever. "So are you going to join us?" He seems to think his rant was really convincing, he extended a hand. I contemplated a bit. Was he an idiot? I remember him being one of the smarter characters in the plot. I left him with his hand extended. I took on a thinking posture, I looked as serious as I could. Then, with a spark in my eyes and a friendly smile on my face, I severed his hand and kicked him into a wall. We were underground so the entire structure shook. Chronostasis quickly took out a handgun and tried to shoot me. It should be quirk-canceling bullets. I remember thinking they could be an issue. But with my speed, I can't really be hit by them. I can't remember much about them however, which is why I won't let one touch me carelessly. I flashed in front of him and he tried to impale me with his hair, but I kicked him into the ceiling. He remained suspended there, with the upper half of his body stuck in the ceiling. Overhaul miraculously wasn't instantly knocked out. He managed to stop his stump from bleeding while chronostasis kept me entertained. Looking at me with hatred he said, "Why?" He tried placing his hand on the wall beside him, but a spike made out of solid light impaled his palm and pushed it away. The spike proceeded to grow more spikes that managed to impale his arm and torso in 6 different places. "You really are hopeless," I said with the same lazy look on my face. I knocked him out and continued to walk towards the cells. I only have Eri to save now. Chapter 31, Little Girl and Trauma. When opening the door to her cell I could see her just sitting on her bed, dressed in that awful gown with her arms and legs covered in bandages. Seeing her like that made my heart churn. She trembled as I opened the door. She should be about 5 years old. Meaning she has been here for only a year at most. Since she was only abandoned after awakening her quirk. I approach her slowly, she seems to not want to look up in my direction. "Hey, are you feeling well?" I took on the kindest tone I could manage. Not recognizing my voice she quickly looked up, her eyes widening in what I can only describe as shock and fear. "I really dislike seeing that." "Who are you?" Her voice quivered. At this point, she probably already knows all of her captors, my face should be new to her. With the most reassuring smile that I could manage on my face, I said, "I am Alan, I work as a hero. I came here for you." My smile calmed her, only briefly. She regained the same scared look when she heard the last part. Please don't. They will make you disappear too." Well, seeing her in person makes me want to go back and slice Overhaul's other arm off. But he's already down, that wouldn't be very hero-like. "Don't worry about me, everything is being taken care of." I flashed a smile that seemed to calm her down a bit. "What is your name, little girl?" I bent down and patted her head. She recoiled at first but calmed down after a few seconds. My name is Eri." She paused a bit, I kept patting her head for a bit, then I retracted my hand. She seemed a bit sad for a second, but she recovered quickly. "You are a very polite girl." Saying that I extended a palm towards her. Slowly to not scare her, she still looked hesitant. But she still put her little hand in mine. I gently pulled her up. Holding her to my chest she quickly wrapped her arms and legs around me. She just made a quiet protest and looked at me curiously. "It's fine, we should probably leave this place." She looked excited at the prospect, but she was still scared. "Don't worry, I'll protect you." I hugged her closer to me while saying that. I started walking back into the corridor. My dynamic entry might have ruined some of the lights in this place. Eri seemed a bit afraid, her hold on me tightening a little. I did promise I'd protect her. That includes her happiness. Using my free hand I softly poked her cheek. When she looked up she saw my face, the same reassuring smile plastered onto it, then she looked around. The corridor was being filled with small lights. It looked like we were walking through a sky filled with stars. I could see Eri's eyes widen as they gazed upon the light show I made for her. I could see the wonder and happiness in them. I continued walking, traversing the lights, sometimes walking through them, other times making them avoid me. I brought one closer to Eri as she reached out with her small hand and grasped it. She had one of the biggest smiles I've ever seen on her face. The panic and fear from before were lost, all that was left was childlike joy and curiosity. The smile on her face was the cutest thing I had ever seen, it probably did more damage to me than the entirety of mhaisekai. It felt as if an arrow went through me. I vow to protect this smile. But I won't leave it at that, she needs to see that her oppressor was not going to harm her or anybody else ever again. With that thought in mind, I soldiered on, determined to completely erase her fear of this place from her mind. The lights dancing around us were turning this dim place that once kept her into a beautiful painting. Gaining different colors and playing around us, as if they were conscious and alive. Looking back, we hadn't covered much distance. I had walked extremely slow, letting Eri experience this at a good pace. But we already were in front of the room I left the villains in. My free hand was already on the doorknob. Before entering I said, "Eri, remember. You don't have anything to fear when I am with you." I said that with a lot of energy, hoping that some of my confidence would rub off on her. She just nodded. She was a bit anxious, but all of my efforts were showing. She still had that smile on her face. When she saw what was inside the room she panicked, clutching me tightly and burying her face in my chest. I could feel her small horn touching my ribs. The sight might be brutal for a 5-year-old, but she has already seen people die. She had already seen savagery and brutality that one of such innocence shouldn't have. "He can't hurt you anymore. I made sure of that," I said slowly. Trembling, she finally managed to see the state of her captors. One was buried in the ceiling while the other was missing an arm and unconscious. She looked around the room, scanning it and trying to understand what had happened. Then she finally looked up. She saw my face. I had a smile filled with kindness and care. Before I realized it, her eyes filled up with tears. She clung tightly to me. I could hear a stifled "thank you." I responded by hugging her. Now I just needed to call the police to pick up Overhaul's group, but they most likely noticed the explosions happening here. They should have sent some people here already. "Let's leave this place." Saying that, I continued my way through the tunnels, using my perception to navigate my way to an exit. Chapter 32, Calm Before the Shitstorm. When I walked into the courtyard of the compound, I could already feel that the place was surrounded. Above my head, I could see a news helicopter. They had moved fast, but it may just be because I took my time with Eri. I guess a bit of publicity isn't that harmful. I think that taking action against a group of drug dealers and manufacturers isn't that big of an issue. Even if they just started producing and distributing. Most of my issues are in regards to the way this could be interpreted. I was going on a holiday but ended up violently taking down a dangerous villain group. That excuse might not fly that well under the radar. Regardless, they won't really interrogate me or anything. I'm still a hero with a provisional license. Even if I'm technically still serving a sentence for vigilantism. All this time I haven't let go of Eri. I should think of a way to keep her near me. I can't really adopt her. Not only am I underage, I'm also a person with a criminal record and don't really have a house. I need to think of something for her since she can't really control her quirk. She is better off living at UA. With my current salary, I can hire some teachers to homeschool her. Although knowing Nizu, he'd take care of that himself. He's probably the smartest person in this world. At least I think so. He probably understands that the government doesn't have many options when it comes to holding me down. Right now their biggest concern is that I don't become a villain or something. Thankfully I made sure to show an extreme distaste towards villains in the past. Deals with Jiren aside, I do actually hate most villains. I'll worry more about that later. My interactions with Jiren would also lessen after this. As I walked slowly, I could see Eri looking somewhat scared. More and more thugs started to appear around us. There were around 80 of them. I think they don't realize that their boss is gone. Some pulled out their guns while some decided to encircle and rush at me. I simply raised my free hand, sending a small orb of light into the sky above us, making sure to avoid the helicopter. When it reached a certain height, it grew to colossal proportions, creating a shockwave that managed to part the clouds around it. It certainly caught the villains off guard. Some even dropped their guns. Looking up, they saw a second source of light in the sky. It looked like the sun came closer to Earth. It was not radiating any heat, but just its size was enough to put fear in them. Eri also looked up at the sky in wonder. her eyes singing with curiosity and awe. Heavenly discharge, I said slowly and lazily, my voice reverberating throughout the field. Heroes need to name their finishers. I made it up on the spot, of course. Only Eri and the villains heard me, anyway. At least I think so, not that it matters. Then they heard me snap my fingers, a rain of light rays falling around me and Eri. An overly complicated attack, sure, but it looked cool for the people at home. It looked like the sun was raining destructive rays on us. The light burned through the people around me, sending them to the ground writhing in pain. The attacks were too fast for these thugs to even react to, let alone dodge. When some of the rays reached the ground, they exploded, taking out all of the villains at once. This attack was only usable because I had my perception focused on the villains, otherwise, it would be too fatal for hero work. I dispersed the light in the sky, giving the viewers a bit of a show. After that, I just slowly walked over the downed villains. Getting to the police cars, I heard one speak through the megaphone. "Yellow Flash, what's the situation here? They obviously know who I am. Not that many people can display this amount of power." I made my way to them to speak normally. They also seemed okay with that, even though they were a bit tense. My attack amazed them, but that doesn't mean they were not in a stressful situation still. This place hosted a group of villains that distributed and developed different drugs. They were quite new, I'll give a report later. They just looked at me for a bit, then the one I assumed to be in charge asked the most obvious question they could. "Was the child you're carrying a prisoner here?" They probably needed her testimony for some of the stuff that happened here. "Yes, I'll be taking her to a hospital and bringing her over to the station later for the report." He seemed pleased enough with that. "You guys should hurry up and take some of the injured villains to the hospital. There is a huge underground labyrinth where you should find their leader." He nodded and started moving his people to capture the downed villains. I gave them a few more directions and information about the injuries of some of the villains. When talking to the policeman, I could hear a lot of flashes around me. Camera crews made it here already. I think I did enough for now. It's about time to depart. Holding Eri tightly, I asked, "Have you flown before?" It was a rhetorical question, of course. She still shook her head cutely. "Hold on tight and remember. There is nothing to fear." Saying that, I jumped and made my way to the station, creating a wind barrier made out of light for Eri. She screamed a bit at first but calmed down after a bit. "Where are we going?" She was clinging tightly to me. Flying can be a bit terrifying for first-timers. Looking at her, I simply said, "Home, Eri, we are going home." With that, she closed her eyes and dozed off. POV Rumi Usajiyama. I didn't actually have any plans for today. I feel a bit sad lying to Alan, but I don't know why I was a bit disappointed when he called me for a raid. He usually doesn't call me in the middle of the day, it's always the morning or the evening. For some reason, I thought he wanted to do something else. I think he sounded a bit sad. But I don't want to just spend time with him when we're working and training. I think I will talk to him about it. Turning on my TV, I could see some news on a raid. I didn't realize he would do it so quickly. I could see a figure from the awkward angle of the helicopter. A tall man in a yellow suit and marine cape. He had yellowish skin, short black hair with somewhat thick lips and droopy eyes that could be seen even under his sunglasses. He was obviously Alan, but the stranger part was what he was holding. It seemed to be a small girl, covered in bandages and wearing a dirty gown. I unknowingly started clenching my fist at the sight of her. She clung tightly to Alan, her size was almost comical in comparison to him. It made the two look like father and daughter. I noticed a large group of villains closing in on Alan. I was worried for about 1 second. Alan was not in danger at all, I should know better than to doubt his ability at this point. But it was more like an instinct. The next scene made me smile, seeing him raise his hand. He was also sporting a lazy smile. The panicked cameraman managed to catch the expansion of that small orb. I haven't seen this move before, but just from its size, I can tell he's angry. That smile of his was not always honest. He should be blowing off some steam. This is the first time I heard him name an attack. The name sounded a bit overbearing, but looking at the scope of the attack, it was fitting. He was obviously showing off. Really, was he trying to create a cult of fangirls or something? Regardless, the second the lights started falling on the villains, the camera only managed to catch the end of the exchange, giving the people at home an image of the fallen villains and the entire courtyard riddled with holes and craters. The light dispersing slowly in a harmless and beautiful scene. It almost looked like fireworks. This should give people some perspective. Maybe a feeling of safety. There was another pillar of strength that society could lean on for support. I could only feel regret. I could have been beside him now, instead of sitting on my couch and watching TV. With a sigh, I turned off the TV. He will probably get in a lot of trouble too. He most likely gave serious injuries to a lot of villains just with that attack. But he'll manage, he always does. Chapter 33, Reactions and Care. POV: All Might weren't expecting that, were you? After a long day of training my disciple and studying so that I can be a better teacher, I usually relax for the rest of the time. Today I gave young Midoriya a break, he still needs one from time to time. I also managed to get some free time, having already studied most of what Nizu gave me. Right now I have the television in the background while looking up some new things for my pupil. His progress is steady. I must raise the intensity of his training gradually. To do that I need more research. From my TV I suddenly heard. Breaking news: explosions have been heard from a compound in the vicinity of Tokyo. One person was sent flying through the gate and the police have surrounded the gate. Hearing all that made me whip my head to the television. We will switch the view to our reporter, who has an aerial view from our helicopter. I could see the big compound and the police surrounding it. I hope this isn't something too bad. I won't be able to make it in time all the way over there. Then I could see a person I recognized. It was young Alan. He is always up to something, isn't he? He had become a touchy subject for me. I don't really understand him well, but I managed to overcome my guilt after a while. But I could tell he wasn't fighting seriously when he was captured. Back then I was getting tired and expending my time. He seemed to notice the smoke coming out of me. He stopped for long enough to allow Aizawa to use his ability on him. It still boggles me to this day. Why he did something like that. I know he wanted to become a hero. I started believing that he was just testing himself. Seeing him surrounded by villains wasn't concerning to me at all. Maybe the number was a bit much, but I am sure he will manage. It is more dangerous now that he has a child in his arms. After seeing young Alan on a day-to-day basis, I realized that strength isn't even something he's concerned about. He trains a lot. But he doesn't use a lot of his strength in anything but that. He would much rather spend his free time after training sleeping or eating. He was by no means ever going to become a role model, at least I hope he doesn't. His attitude also lessened my anxiety by a lot. He was always nonchalant, lacking any trauma and or mental scars from his experiences. His attitude could be somewhat refreshing. His next move was a bit much for me. The size of that light orb alone was twice as big as the USJ. If he had used that in our fight he would have won instantly, taking out both the police and every hero that was present there. That type of power was something that I wasn't capable of even at my peak. The speed and reach of the attack being monstrous even in my eyes. It was reassuring, however, knowing that such power is on our side. I now know that my era is coming to an end. At least I don't have to hurry the training of my pupil. The next generation looks a lot more promising than the last. The people are in good hands. POV narration: don't want to confuse PPL anymore. While Toshinori was left feeling content and reassured, from the Bakugo household, you could hear a lot of swearing and screaming. While, a bit later, Izuku was also clenching his fist, looking at a repeat of the incident on his phone. Both he and Bakugo were training extremely hard to catch up to Alan. But the gap was only becoming wider and more evident. It made both of them even more determined than before. Izuku calling All Might to train on his free day and Bakugo grabbing his stuff and going to a quirk gym. It was a bit pricey, but it was the best place for aspiring heroes to train before attempting to enter a hero school. The same situation was happening in other places, when Mirio saw that he could barely contain his excitement, rushing to the field and training with renewed vigor. Tamaki was not as excited, but he was solemn, he didn't want his friends getting ahead of him. Nejire was about the same in excitement, maybe more. She had a wide smile when she saw her friends training and deciding to join them instantly. All three of them started ignoring what they needed to study for tests. Too caught up in their excitement. They will be crying later though. The incident had already gone viral, making the Yellow Flash one of the most searched up names for the next few weeks. It was now one of the most viewed videos on HeroTube there. I did it. POV MC back on track. After flying for a while, I made it to the walls of UA. Eri had already opened her eyes by now. Staring at them in wonder. "This is your home?" she asked in a sweet and excited voice. Her first time seeing UA was cute to witness. "Well, I do live here. But it's also where I work." She looked just as happy, probably not really getting it. "I'll be taking you to a very good doctor. She can heal you up very nicely." The smile on my face was coming out naturally at this point. Her smile was also just as wide, if not wider. I hope Recovery Girl won't mind the extra work. Although, knowing her, she might just completely ignore me and take Eri for herself. Regardless, I reached the infirmary and brought Eri to a bed, and just as expected. Recovery Girl didn't even treat me like air. I didn't exist in her eyes at all. She was gushing over how cute Eri was and how could anyone ever do anything bad to something that cute. Recovery Girl's harmless appearance made her the perfect person to take care of Eri. Looking at them, I simply said, "Eri, I will go out for a bit. Don't worry, I'll be nearby." I put on a reassuring smile while looking at Eri. I still needed to talk to Nizu, and probably get an earful from him. For the whole violent takedown of a villain group deal, I also needed to write up a report for the police station. With the spectacle, I just put on I doubt I'd get much more than a fine as punishment. The takedown itself would pay me more than they would fine me. Nodding her head, Eri said, "I'll wait here." Meanwhile, Recovery Girl just gave me the stink eye and said, "What, you were still here?" shoo, while waving me off. She really hated that after me coming to UA her workload increased. She liked taking that out on me. But I wasn't just going to ignore her jab. "Ah, old people, I didn't even get to finish that before receiving the cane." Eri just giggled at the scene. With a wry smile, I left the room. Wondering how my life choices led me to this place. Chapter 34, Nizu and Adoption. When reaching Nizu's office, I could already feel him in there, combing his fur like usual. I think he spends more time on that than on school issues. With his brain, most paperwork gets done instantly anyway. Knocking on the door, I put on the best smile I could. It was practiced in my last life as a corporate rat. I wasn't always a freelancer, after all. I once tried to climb the corporate ladder and live the capitalist dream. Finally, my skills will be put to good use. After hearing him tell me to come in, opened the door and said, "Good day, sir. Isn't today just beautiful?" He just stared at me, with an amused look on his face. I hope he doesn't find my situation amusing. His sense of humor can be a bit sadistic. "Oh, young Alan. Take a seat, I believe we have a few things to discuss," he said with a shit-eating grin on his face while pointing to a nearby couch. The discussion was quite annoying. It thankfully didn't take that long. It basically resulted in him reminding me that my situation is still a special case and that I should pay a bit of attention to my actions. He also seemed pleased by my display of strength. It would make the government a lot more reluctant to punish me if the public considered me one of their most powerful protectors. Then we got to the part that actually interests me. "What will happen to Eri about the little girl you've brought here?" "We don't know much about her situation," it would be great if you could clear a few things for me. Basically, she has a very powerful quirk that she can't really control and she was being exploited because of it. She doesn't have anywhere to go," I said, with a bit of a frown on my face. "I think the best thing we could do is to keep her here, where she can learn to control her power and get a proper education." I turned that frown into a confident smile instantly. "I understand where you are coming from, Alan. But, a child as young as she still needs parental love. Wouldn't the best option be to find a family willing to adopt her?" Nizu's concern was well-founded. He was speaking to an orphan right now, one that had turned to a very dangerous profession from a young age. "I want to take care of her. I think she also wouldn't mind." But legally, Nizu interrupted me, with an amused smile on his face. "You don't really need to worry about legality. There are many loopholes we can take advantage of in that field. I guess he always does this type of stuff." He continued with the same amount of energy. "I believe the best course of action is to ask her about her opinion. Although she is young, she should still have a say in all of this." We were obviously going to ask her. But regardless of whether she ends up with me or with a loving family, it's still for the best if she studies here. At the end of the day, I think it's better to give her some control. After being locked away against her will, having control over her own fate might be a bit therapeutic. Now, when it comes to your options for adoption, you can't really adopt her in your name. I think you are well aware of that already." Nizu really didn't like to sugarcoat things. I was going to say something, but he interrupted my thoughts. "However, if you could get someone you trust to adopt her, you could still raise her." "Great, human connections, my weakness. I will think of someone, Principal. I think Rumi could help me in this case, since she has a clean record and all. I just hope it won't be too much to ask of her." After that, I said my goodbye and took my leave, leaving Nizu to make some phone calls. The only thing left to do was to talk to Eri. But not before using my fastest speed to rush all the clothing stores in the area. I was not going to let her wear that rag for more than necessary. Surprisingly, a lot of people recognized me and some shops even gave me discounts. I was speed buying an entire wardrobe for my little Eri. Now, I wasn't planning on spending all of my savings here, but I can't really help it. I now have more bags in my hands than it should be humanly possible. I even used my light to create a cart to haul all the shoeboxes and bags filled with clothes. Most people took pictures of me. I think my shopping spree in the children's clothing aisle made people look at me weirdly. But their looks don't bother me, for my mission is sacred. Returning to UA with all that baggage wasn't that quick. I could speed up and cover more distance and all, but I needed some time to think. What if Rumi didn't want to help me? Who would I go to then? Would Toshinori accept? Worries of this kind were really annoying. But I don't care what happens, Eri must stay by my side. I already swore to protect her, nothing was going to stop me from doing so. Now I could just hope I didn't take too long on her clothes. Making my way to the infirmary and leaving the clothes at the door, I could hear her laughing. As soon as I entered the room, I saw the big three there. They were playing with Eri. They really were good at calming the people around them. Well, everyone besides Recovery Girl, who was looking at them with unadulterated hatred. I think I can piece together what happened here. They went overboard with their training and got injured, came here and interrupted Recovery Girl's time with Eri and gave her more work. If they weren't injured already, they would have gotten injured by coming here. Eri was the first to notice my presence, gaining a big smile and rushing and hugging me. "Alan!" She jumped and I also grabbed her, bringing her to my chest once more. Mirio just looked on with a smile and said, "Alan! That raid was impressive." Nejire also looked excited when seeing me. "We should totally train together more," Recovery Girl quickly reacted by saying. "If you do, don't you dare come to me to get fixed up," glaring at us and making Tamaki almost whimper. "I'm glad you guys are getting along with Eri." We continued talking for a bit. Unfortunately, they didn't stay long. eager to return to their training, much to the distaste of our resident youthful nurse. Now it was the time for my conversation with Eri. Chapter 35, Eri's Decision. After the three aspiring heroes left, there was only me, Recovery Girl and Eri in the infirmary. Eri didn't really leave my arms since she got there. I guess I can't complain, she is very light anyway, get it. Looking at Eri, I started talking to get her attention. There are a few things we have to do now. She looked my way expectantly and somewhat curious. We need to ask you about your decision, whether you wish for me to keep taking care of you or if you wish to be adopted by a loving family. I didn't really want to force her into choosing me. Even if she chooses to get adopted, I would still help her and protect her. I would also make sure to help her master her quirk. Aizawa would probably be her teacher. More work for him. She looked a bit surprised at this. Her large eyes widening just a little bit more. I want to stay with Big Brother. I guess hearing her call me that isn't bad. Although it dealt some damage to my feeble heart. Thank you, Eri. Unknowingly, my face gained a huge smile. While she seemed happy that she had the choice, I still had quite a few things to do, besides writing that blasted report for the police station. I also need to bring Eri there once she's recovered. They just need the testimony of a victim. It shouldn't take long, she just needs to say a few things and someone will just write them down. I just hope they won't have to make her relieve those things. But, for now, that solves the adoption issue. Now I just need to somehow convince Rumi to become a mother for me. I also should ask her out on something besides training and patrolling. It would be sad if all we did was train, since it's quite clear we both like each other. Now that I think about it, adopting a child with Rumi might be skipping some stages of our relationship. Oh well, I'm sure there won't be any problem here. I'll talk to her tomorrow. Now I need to write that report and get Eri to wear something nice. Eri, I bought you some clothes. Her face lit up in excitement. I guess she didn't get to choose much about her wardrobe while in the care of mhaisekai. Want to come and choose a few you like? She nodded quickly. I walked with her in hand to the door and brought all of the bags in the infirmary. Recovery Girl just looked at us with a small smile. I'm guessing it was mostly directed at Eri, but she wasn't going to make a fuss about this as long as I cleaned up after myself. Putting everything down including Eri, I told her. You can look and choose anything you like from here. I just bought them on my way here, I said with a smile while on one knee. Eri looked up at me and thanked me again, this time her large eyes had a few tears in them. I instantly started panicking internally. What to do when your child cries for the first time? I looked at Recovery Girl, she just nodded, probably thinking I was going to do something. My mind was racing and the only thing I could come up with was to pick her up and create a small string of light, making it dance around us, forming figures and shapes while wriggling, flying around her. She was still sobbing, but the light managed to distract her a bit. Thankfully, her tears weren't sad ones, she had a small smile on her face. She just hugged me tightly, well, as tightly as she could. With our difference in size, it was hard for her to get a good hold on me. I could hear her whispering a soft thank you and crying. It turned the panic in my heart into happiness, a smile reshaping itself onto my face. I stayed like that for a few minutes. The light played around us for a while before entering my sleeve and vanishing. I was patting her back while she cried. As she slowly separated from me, I just said, "You're welcome." With that, she also started smiling brightly, looking down at the clothes surrounding her, and starting to search some of the bags for things she might like. Recovery Girl will help her put them on when she decides which she likes most. I let her do that by herself. She had quite a bit to choose from, so I guess it should take a while. I left the room after a while. I still need to go start writing on that report. Reaching my room was easy. I always leave my window open so that I don't have to climb up any stairs. It helps a lot. I can just reflect myself into my bed and fall asleep. But this time I went to the desk to start writing. Well, I took a shower and got changed first. I'm trying to postpone talking to Rumi about adoption for as long as possible. Writing this report is one method to do it. I can also go and inform Nizu of Aries' choice, even though he was most likely already informed by Recovery Girl. By the time I finished writing the report, the sun was already starting to go down. I just sent it to their email. I didn't really feel like flying all the way over to them to deliver it. I needed to check on Eri one last time before going to inform Nizu about her choice. She should sleep in the infirmary for tonight. But, I don't really want her to feel lonely. I guess I'll figure something out. When I came into the room, I could see the bags still near her bed. She was dressed in a pair of pajamas I bought for her. She was already sleeping. It has been a tiring day for her. It was a tiring day for me too, not physically of course. Well, Nizu can wait. I go to a random bed inside the infirmary and sleep my worries off. Meanwhile, the police were announcing the state of the raid and the way it was handled to the press.
That is all for today. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this journey, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. If you have any suggestions or feedback for me, please drop a comment down below.